Welcome everyone to today's National RTAP webinar, On-Ramps, Intersections, and Exit Routes, a roadmap for transit agencies to prevent and disrupt human trafficking. My name is Liz Taylor, Assistant Director here at National RTAP. We're really excited to have our presenters here to present on this important topic. Next slide. Before we get started though, we're going to do a few quick polls to learn more about you all as our attendees and your understanding of human trafficking. So our first poll, we're gonna launch. If you can fill that out, and we'll close it when we have a good amount of responses.
Oh, okay.
We'll just give it another couple seconds if everyone can vote. Okay, we can close that and share the results. So most are rural or small urban transit providers, and if you had to select other, if you can let us know in the questions box and what your type of agency you're coming from. So then next poll, if you can fill this out. If you haven't seen the movie Taken, then you can click unsure. And our speakers will explain this a little bit further. So we'll keep it open for another few seconds. Okay, great. And so most of you do not think that it's like Taken, and most of you are also unsure. So that's great. We're going to learn more today. So right now, I'm going to turn it over to our Executive Director, Robin Phillips, to introduce our presenters and the topic today.
Well, hi everyone, and welcome to the webinar. We have two amazing and very experienced women who've been engaged with these issues for years today. Kristen Joyner is the Executive Director of the Southwest Transit Association and has been appointed to the by Transportation Secretary Elaine Chow's Advisory Committee for Human Trafficking. This is a US DOT-wide committee, and Kristen has been instrumental in bringing rural transit and transit issues to the table in this discussion. She has been representing the transit sector on that 15-member panel, and the group is being called on to provide expertise, advice, and recommendations to the Department of Transportation. Kristen has been involved in the fight to end trafficking for more than 5 years and served on the Transportation Leaders Against Human Trafficking White House Task Force, Volunteers for Present Age Ministries, and an organization dedicated to helping survivor girls 12 to 18, and transportation role and responsibility in human trafficking. Kristen is committed to these issues and has been providing information and training to transit programs nationally for the last few years. Annie Slovik, who will be providing information after Kristen, she has more than 12 years experience as a human rights lawyer working on anti-human trafficking, anti-torture, and refugee protection policies at a national and international level. Before she got involved with BOTL, or Busing on the Lookout, which is the program she works with now, she was the director of the Washington, D.C. office of the Center for Victims of Torture. She has also worked for United Nations High Commissioner on Refugees and attended the university. She graduated from the University of New Mexico Law School and received a BA in International Studies from University of Denver. So the women that are going to be talking about this today are the best, the brightest, and the most current information, and are helping us at RTAP provide you with the best information we can about how you can be involved in stopping this. Thanks. Kristen?
All right. I think that you need to give me the screen possibly, unless it's up there. I see it up there. Good. Okay. Excellent. All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and learn about human trafficking, how it intersects with public transportation, and how public transportation is unfortunately part of the problem, but it's also part of the solution. And I want to help you, and Annie wants to help you see how you can be part of that solution starting today. So the first thing I want us to do is, on my screen, I have the mantra that I like to start out with when I talk about human trafficking awareness and public transportation. So I'm going to just tell you what this mantra is first. It's not on my bus, not on my train, not in my community. Now, I know that we're all sitting at our own desks and in our own offices. Maybe some of us are even at home, so nobody's looking right now. But I'd love for you to stand up with me right now. It's after lunch, and so that's okay for most of us. It's after lunch. And I want you to stand up, and I want you to repeat the mantra after me. Even if I can't hear you, you'll be able to hear yourself. So it's not on my bus, not on my train, not in my community. Thank you. You guys can sit down. You did a great job. You can advance the slide. I want to start out by, I believe that you guys had control of the screen. So if you can.
Actually, Kristen, you have control of the screen. I'm happy to take it back from you if you'd like.
Okay, why don't you do that, because it's not working on my end. So human trafficking, as we're getting this set up, we have a lot of ideas of what human trafficking looks like. I think it's important that we start with our with a working definition. So go ahead and advance to the next slide. You know, sometimes with human trafficking, we can get confused. Go ahead back to the screen before. We can get confused because the media shows us pictures of what human trafficking looks like in a revved up Hollywood movie type picture, which is what the movie Taken actually was about. For those of you who have not seen it, it's about a young girl, a teenage girl, who ends up in another country. She's kidnapped and taken into a sex slave situation. And by the way, just so everybody knows, this is going to be a PG-13 conversation today. You can't talk about human trafficking without bringing in some very difficult words and difficult concepts. But with the movie Taken, it truly paints a picture of this situation of human trafficking being something that happens over there. It's about kidnapping. It's people that are foreigners that we don't know. So one of our goals today for Annie and for myself is to give you the true picture of what human trafficking looks like. Next slide. We're going to start with a working definition of human trafficking, and this comes from the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000. It's the only time that I'm going to read a slide to you. And you're sitting at your desk, and so I do want you, when we get to the yellow words on the screen, I want you to say those words out loud, because that's very important. It's an important part of of learning what the law really says. So the term severe forms of trafficking in persons means this. It's sex trafficking in which a commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion. Those are three really important words, and I want you to say them again. Force, fraud, or coercion. Annie's going to show you what each of those things might look like. Or in which the person induced to perform such act has, everybody say it with me, not attained 18 years of age. Very important distinction. So if you're an adult and you are involved in a commercial sex act that involves force, fraud, or coercion, then that is the definition of sex trafficking. However, if you have not reached the age of 18, so if you're under the age of 18 and you are forced to perform a commercial sex act, then the law says that force, fraud, or coercion does not have to be proven. The second form of human trafficking that we have in the United States is the recruitment, harboring, everybody say the next word, transportation, provision or obtaining of a person for labor or services through the use of, say it again, force, fraud, or coercion, for the purpose of subjection to involuntary servitude, peonage, debt bondage, or slavery. Those are a lot of words. I'm going to show you what it looks like. Next slide. This slide is just a real quick pictorial of what you might see anywhere in the United States as it relates to either sex trafficking or labor trafficking. You might see labor trafficking in a hotel or on a construction site. It might be in a kitchen or on a farm somewhere. Sex trafficking can look like anything, anybody, just like labor trafficking can. It knows no bounds, male, female, old, young. And then there's one thing that we like to talk about, and that's the signs, clues, and tattoos. So in thinking about the United States, there's only one thing that we brand in the US, and that's cattle or livestock, unless you're involved in human trafficking. And branding or tattooing is a common way for human traffickers to claim ownership of their victim. And I'm not saying that all tattoos mean that you're involved in human trafficking. What I'm saying is that if you see a young girl that has a tattoo on her chest or on her shoulder blades or on her arm that says Big Daddy or something else very suggestive, or you see several girls that have a common tattoo on an arm, the shoulder blades or on chest, those are the common areas, then you might want to ask some questions. But we'll talk more about that here in a few minutes. Next slide. So there's a report on Polaris. Polaris is the national collection database system for all data coming in having to do with human trafficking. And recently, they did an interview of human trafficking survivors that were involved in sex trafficking and labor trafficking. In this conversation, they asked were the businesses that you actually that you were involved in human trafficking, and out of that research, if you notice on the screen, there's some very good information. Next slide. The chart on the next slide will show you, and this is also online, and I have provided this information, a link to this information in the PowerPoint that I provided for RTAP. But on this slide, you will see all the different ways that the people interviewed in this particular in this particular research project, how they were trafficked. So it might be escort services, peddling or begging, landscaping, carnivals, forestry and logging, healthcare, health and beauty services, construction, pornography. So all domestic work. So that's the column on the left. The columns all across the top then show the different businesses in the United States that this intersects with. So you've got financial services industry, hotels and motels, housing and homelessness systems, social media, temporary work visas, transportation. And if you notice, transportation takes up a lot of the blocks on here. Transportation was used in escort services, illicit massage, outdoor solicitation, residential sex trafficking, domestic work, bars, trips, strip clubs, and pornography, traveling sales crews, restaurants, agriculture, health and beauty, landscaping, illicit activities, arts and sports, carnivals, forestry and logging. All of those types of human trafficking did intersect with transportation. And I read all those to you because I know some of you might not be looking at the slide right now, but you can go to the Polaris website and you can pull up this report to see it for yourself. Next slide. So in our next slide, we see that the breakdown of race and ethnicity. It mirrors the population of the United States. So white Caucasian, 67%, Latino, 14%, Black African American is 10%, multiracial, American, Indian, Alaskan Native, Asian, those each make up 7% of those that were interviewed. So that's the important key, is that this research project is based on who was interviewed. Next slide, please. So then we have the breakdown of gender, age, at trafficking entry, and immigration status. So the gender was predominantly, of those interviewed, was predominantly female, 86%, with 12% being male, and gender minorities is 2%. The age of entry at trafficking means that the first time that the individual was trafficked goes from age 0 to 11, which makes up 17%, all the way up to age 48 plus, which makes up 6%. The unfortunate thing is that we have 35% of this group that are under the age of 18. So remember, that's in terms of sex trafficking. Force, fraud, and coercion do not have to be proven if they're involved in a commercial sex act. I will tell you that I heard the story of a woman in her 30s. She talked about the fact that her mother began trafficking her at the age of 6. She said that she was trafficked until she was 20 and finally left her trafficker. She was trafficked on public transportation all up and down the eastern seaboard to Chicago, a lot of different places. And the interesting thing about it that I think will strike you as much as it did me is that she had to memorize all of the bus routes, all of the metro routes in each of these cities, because that's how she was sent to her different trafficking situations. Well, I can imagine that you are probably thinking, oh, that, who was her mother? And I'm sure that you have in your head a particular type of a person, maybe an age, maybe you have in your head a particular nationality or race. You may even be thinking that this mother did this because they were impoverished and maybe drug addicted, mentally ill. And I'm here to tell you that The shocking part of this particular story is this was a middle-class white family, and the mother was a registered nurse, so a professional. And this young girl, this child, innocent child at 6, was first trafficked, and but she did get out of this. And I tell you the story about her because public transportation was used in her trafficking. I will tell you the end of the story is that public transportation was also the beginning of her way out. And she, in her 20s, ended up at a bus stop. She was asleep on a bus bench when an early morning operator pulled up at the bus stop and asked her, "Do you need help?" She said it was the very first time that anyone asked her that question. She was cold, dressed inappropriately, hungry, and scared, and got on that vehicle expecting not to be able to get on without paying something for her fare. This operator knew she was in trouble, said, "Don't worry about it. I haven't asked you for anything." He gave her a sandwich, he gave her a coat, and he took her to safety. And that began her journey to wholeness. I'm going to pass on, I want to send you now to Annie, who is going to take information that has been gathered from a lot of sources, research and research with survivors, research that we know exists out there, and just a lot of information from law enforcement. Annie is a great resource. She also has an excellent training program that you're going to find compelling and easy to use. So I'm going to pass this over to Annie and let her get this started so that you can get the bigger picture and even very specific questions answered.
Great. Hi, everyone. Hopefully you're able to see my screen now. I'm Annie Slovik, and I'm the director of Busing on the Lookout, and just want to thank Kristen and RTAP for hosting this session today. It really is a privilege to be part of this webinar and to talk with you all about some practical, tangible, and relatively easy ways you as transit leaders can join the fight against human trafficking in your communities. So Busing on the Lookout is a program of Truckers Against Trafficking, or TAT, as we call it for short. BOTL was launched a little over a year ago, though TAT has worked with the trucking industry since 2009 to combat the domestic sex trafficking taking place along our nation's roadways. And through this work, truck drivers have proven time and again that they are the eyes and ears of our nation's highways, as many victims have been identified and recovered through their efforts. But we also know the members of the bus industry are out on those roads, whether it's long distance or within communities. And we recognize that bus drivers, terminal workers, maintenance staff, dispatch operators, ticket counter personnel are also on the front lines and see things many of us do not. And, so what we found is that whether we're talking about truck or bus drivers or truck stop or terminal workers, people in these roles become experts in their environments, and through the course of their everyday jobs, they develop an expertise in the flow, the pace, the interaction, the normal day-to-day situations, which means they also develop a keen awareness of the abnormal and are able to observe some key red flag indicators of human trafficking that may be going on around them. So on public transit, those red flags could be one or a combination of some of these things. And I'm just going to read off a list for you guys to be thinking about as I continue through the rest of this presentation. Think about passengers who are not allowed to speak for themselves, or who are not, seem to be under the control of another person, aren't making eye contact, passengers who aren't in possession of their own, ticket or bus pass or money or identification, perhaps people who have a disheveled appearance or seem agitated, scared, or are showing signs of abuse. Be aware of minors traveling without adult supervision, or minors who are traveling on the public bus during the school day. Why aren't they in school? People offering to exchange sex for a ride or a meal or any other good or service. Really any sign or acknowledgement that they have a pimp or they're needing to make a quota. Certainly any individual who indicates they're being held against their will or seems to show signs of branding or tattooing, as Kristen showed you some photos of, individuals who work excessively long hours or provided few or no breaks, or who have indicated that their employer is withholding pay. The goal of Busing on the Lookout is to empower everyone in the bus industry with information about human trafficking, what to look for, how to report it effectively, so that in those moments when they're observing something that seems off or one of these red flag indicators or others, you know what to do. So in order to do that, we created industry-specific training materials that are specially designed for members of the bus industry, because we believe that you all can provide an extra set of eyes and ears for law enforcement in recovering victims and arresting traffickers. Our training materials are primarily comprised of a 30-minute training video and a wallet card. We make all of these materials available free of charge, and we'll work with you to incorporate them into your training and orientation processes, whether that's through incorporating it into an online LMS, or say dedicating a quarterly safety meeting to the topic. I can mail you copies of the training DVD or send you the downloadable file. If you'd like to see a short 2-minute clip of the training video, the URL to that trailer is here, but we'll also be sending this around in a post-webinar email, so you can take a look at it and kind of see what the training's all about. It is a documentary-style training. It follows the story of a young woman, a survivor, who actually met her trafficker at a bus stop the first time, but it also includes interviews with law enforcement, transportation directors, as well as the executive director of Truckers Against Trafficking. But I'm also excited to announce that we have also partnered with RTAP to make these free training materials available to you as an RTAP online training course, so through the systems that you all are already using. So to find the BOTL training on RTAP, go to the National RTAP e-learning page and log in. And then there you'll see a list of course options, and you can click on the Busing on the Lookout or Transit and Human Trafficking training, where you'll find some introductory slides, and then the system will prompt you to watch a 30-minute documentary-style training video, followed by a 90-second red flag recap. Then after the videos, you'll be prompted to take a 15-question quiz based entirely on the material in the training video. And if you answer 11 out of the 15 questions correctly, then the system will auto-generate a co-branded certificate that will have your name and the date of completion on it. You can then print that certificate out or save it for your own records. For anyone in the state of Kansas, listen carefully. This certificate is more than just something to be proud of. In July 2018, the state of Kansas began requiring that all CDL applicants, new or renewal, present a Truckers Against Trafficking certificate at the DMV to get their license. And so this exact certificate that needs to have your name and the date of completion needs to be presented in order to get, for all bus drivers, in order to get a new or renewal CDL. And really please contact TAT. I'll be including my contact information at the end of this presentation, but contact us directly for any print materials such as wallet cards, dash stickers, or if you want a DVD, and we'll send you as many of those items as you need for your training. And again, we do that free of charge. So I want to talk about our posters and educational materials that are not designed to be for the audience of the drivers or other employees, but rather the audience of the potential victims or victims who may be riding on your buses or on your rails. And according to data from the National Human Trafficking Hotline, the top type of caller into the hotline are community members, and that's broadly defined. But after that, it's actually victims themselves that are calling in seeking assistance. And so knowing that, combined with other research we've seen and conversations we've had with survivors about the various ways that buses and mass transit intersect with human trafficking, we worked with survivors to create a series of posters that use language and visuals that are intended to be eye-catching for victims to see and know they're not alone and know there are resources out there to help them. So these posters, and they do also contribute to general public awareness about how vulnerable girls, boys, women, and men get lured into the trafficking situation. They really are designed to be eye-catching for victims themselves. And we have all of these available in kind of this horizontal kind of landscape orientation, or in a vertical portrait orientation, so they can be hung in terminals, at transit centers, at bus stops, or in the interior of transit buses. And we'll share all of these designs with you free of charge so that you can print them and hang them in areas under your jurisdiction. And all of these designs are available in both English and in Spanish. So I also want to make sure that you're aware of our coalition builds. So in cities throughout the country, Truckers Against Trafficking partners with the State Attorney General's office, usually the State Attorney General's office, to host half-day training and networking events that are designed to bring together law enforcement with key industry stakeholders from the trucking and bus industries. The goal of these events is to build localized networks to close loopholes to traffickers and to help members of the trucking and bus industries know how they can engage and best support law enforcement efforts in their area. So we currently have a few coalition builds coming up in Michigan, Maryland, and New Jersey. But keep checking back on our website to see if there's a bill that's being added in your location, and we would love for you to join us. And the most important part of all of this is that these efforts are working. As I mentioned in the beginning, TAT launched Busing on the Lookout about a year ago, but we've been working with the trucking industry since 2009. And in this time, truck drivers have proven what an extraordinary difference a mobilized and vigilant group of people can make when they understand this crime and know how to report it effectively. Truckers alone have made over 2,250 calls into the National Human Trafficking Hotline, leading to 612 likely cases of human trafficking involving over 1,133 victims. And that's just one slice of the data pie. This doesn't count for calls made to 911, the local sheriff's office, or dispatch. So using this model, just imagine what an impact public transit can have in communities throughout the United States. Now, I've mentioned a couple of times that we make our materials available free of charge. We do that because we don't want cost to be a barrier to any company, school district, or public transit system to get this information out to their frontline employees. But this work would not be possible without the generosity of our corporate foundation and individual donors. So I'd like to give a special thanks to our Gold, Platinum, Diamond, and Freedom Driver level corporate sponsors. So what can you do? How can you get involved? First and foremost, as you're thinking about adopting any kind of anti-human trafficking training or initiative, make sure that you have leadership buy-in. This could be from the CEO or general manager, but certainly make sure that the safety director is on board, and if necessary, that the board of directors is supportive. Make sure you're establishing the necessary partnerships. Partner with us in On the Lookout, and use our materials to train all of your employees. Connect with law enforcement in your area, whether that's through participating in a TAP coalition build, or finding out if there's an anti-human trafficking task force in your area, or knowing the law enforcement resources that are out there when incidents do arise. And connect with a local trafficking victim service organization in your area. Perhaps consider donating ticket vouchers that survivors can access as they work to rebuild their lives after trafficking. Third, determine what your training rollout is going to look like. Are you going to be doing this in person at a safety meeting? If so, get in touch with me. I can send you a DVD or the downloadable files, as well as send you print materials that you can hand out. Or perhaps, it's better for you to do the training online, such as through RTAP. Again, let me know if you want to print materials to supplement that. But either way, if you're using the BOTL materials, please let me know, and please let me know after you've completed those. We do ask that people register as trained, especially if they're doing a group training with multiple drivers. That allows us to be able to track how many people we're reaching with this information. And make sure that your drivers are getting the necessary documentation they need for having completed the training. And again, this is especially important in the state of Kansas, where bus drivers are required to show a BOTL certificate when applying for a renewal commercial driver's license. And thinking about adopting a reporting protocol, we can talk a little bit more about this in a Q&A session or after the webinar, but some things to think about. This protocol should provide guidance on what, as managers, you would expect a driver to do at the point of an initial encounter, thinking about the different scenarios, the who, the what, the when, what internal reporting should be. Is there guidance you can provide them on preserving evidence? This could include saving footage that your security cameras are collecting. This could be tracking credit card transactions, or making sure that any incident report that's written is completed as quickly as possible after the incident, when things are the freshest in people's minds, and that it's as thorough as possible in case there's information there that would be relevant for a law enforcement investigation. Your internal protocols should also indicate what kind of follow-up may occur internally, such as any kind of debriefs or opportunities for further training. And please, if there are any incidents where your drivers report suspicions of human trafficking, I would be really interested in learning about those. We are always interested in making sure our training is up to date and is evolving with our audience's increased understanding and knowing about incidents, how they played out, helps us enhance our own training so that the quality of all of that is improved. And finally, getting involved, do consider participating in a public or targeted awareness campaign. I showed you images of the bottle posters that you can take the designs, print out, and post in, at bus stops, at transit shelters, in the interior buses, at transit centers, nearby businesses, etc. So here is my contact information. I look forward to talking with you about ways that we can partner. We have about 15 minutes remaining. And so unless Kristen wanted to chime in on anything before we opened it up for questions, I think we're moving into a Q&A or discussion period now.
Yeah, Annie, I do want to bring up something really important, and this is a personal experience of training operators and management teams for the last, consistently for the last 2 to 3 years. And all of you who are in public transportation, you know that we have these mandatory safety training meetings. So I was invited to come to a meeting. It would be a 2-hour training session on human trafficking awareness with operators. And they scheduled this for a Sunday evening, mandatory, remember, Sunday evening in January during the Super Bowl playoffs. And I can hear all of you gasping and laughing now about that, even though you're long distance. So during this training, I was with several people who provide services for victims. And we showed up, we were introduced, we had over 200 bus operators in the room, and began our training. We did have to stop every now and then and give the score of the playoff game. But by the time we were finished, at the end of the presentation, the operators were totally engaged. They wanted to do something. The problem was that management had left the building. And as the operators were asking, how do we report? What are our next steps? What do we do? We've seen this at our transfer center. The team of us presenting, we didn't have answers. So I encourage you to, before you just throw this to your operators and say, here you go, here's your mandatory safety training, or here you go, you need to learn about this, which is important. But the first step is management team, along with hopefully your board. You meet, you get trained, and you make some decisions about how are we going to handle reporting. The second thing is speak with local law enforcement and say, we are going to rev up our training on human trafficking awareness. This may cause an increase in calls to your 911 line or to your office. So just know that that's happening. We as transit want to be a partner with you. A third thing that you can do is talk to your operators about how they can, if they see something, they can actually stop their cameras. If you have cameras on board or cameras anywhere within your system, that you can stop your camera and save that video footage, which is vital for law enforcement to be able to carry out a conviction. So know that this is more than just a cool, new, hip way to train your operators. This is actually a way for you to begin to dialogue inside your agency and with law enforcement so that you can make a real difference.
Thank you so much, Kristen. Okay, so I think we're going to take time for questions now. I'm going to read a couple of the questions that have come in so far, but a reminder that you can ask them by typing into the questions area of the control panel. Or if you'd like to ask by your phone or your computer mic and speakers, you can raise your hand by clicking on that little hand icon in the control panel. So first question, if a transit agency is interested in participating in the upcoming coalition build in Baltimore, where can they get more information? And Annie, would you mind answering that question for the rest of the audience? Oop, and Annie, I'm gonna have to unmute you. There you go. Now you can answer. Sorry about that.
Yeah, if you're interested in participating in the coalition build in Baltimore, or the one in 2 weeks in Michigan, or the one in New Jersey, or any in the future, just contact me for more information. And I can make sure that you get an invitation once those are, formalized and ready. Though you can also check on our website. Our website is www.truckersagainsttrafficking.org, and under programs, you can click on coalition builds, and we keep the schedule updated on, there on a regular basis. But specifically for the ones that are already scheduled, just shoot me an email and I can get you more information.
Thank you so much. So another question about resources. Someone is interested in including this in their monthly safety meeting, which is a really great idea. And he's wondering how to get the DVD. So Annie, is there a DVD on your website, or just the training through National RTAP, or what would you suggest for a monthly safety meeting incorporating this?
This is Kristen. I don't know why I'm not hearing Annie and she pop in.
Oh, sorry, I'm off. I just had to unmute myself. Sorry about that. Trying to be conscious of the feedback. So yeah, so to dedicate a safety meeting to this, I can mail you a DVD. So again, just contact me and we'll get the materials that you need in the mail. If it's better for you to just upload or download the electronic file of the video to your laptop or a computer that you may be using, I can email you that file and can send you the print materials.
And depending on the length of time that you have for those meetings, I know some of you do a 5-minute check-in, some of you do maybe a 10 or 15-minute meeting, some of you it's 30 minutes or longer. Annie can work with you on what your time limit is for your safety meeting, and just when you email her, let her know what time frame you're talking about, and she can help you get the right materials for that time frame.
Thanks, Kristen.
Yeah, so something to note, and and if there are things you're interested in doing to kind of enhance the training in terms of discussion or supplementing it with things related to your own internal protocols, et cetera, that's great. But the video itself is intended to be self-sufficient, because we don't want any safety director or other training facilitator to feel like they have to be an expert in this topic in order to share it with their drivers. And it's a complex, nuanced topic that again, we don't want that to be a deterrent for being able to get basic information out.
And one thing that neither Annie nor I emphasize this, when we talk about what your operators or what any frontline staff or anyone is asked to do, it is never, ever to approach a situation that you think might be human trafficking and say, hey, are you being trafficked? Or intervene in any way. What we ask you to do is see something and say something. That's why we talk about making sure you have those safety protocols, those reporting protocols in place, whether it's a code that you send to dispatch, or it's a 911 because you are seeing something in it taking place right then, or it's you making note of where you are, who was involved. You're not really sure what the situation is, but then going back later and reporting to the human trafficking hotline. It is as simple as seeing something and saying something. It's as simple as stopping your camera so there's a time point, and it's as simple as reporting it to dispatch or to a supervisor so that someone who is trained in stepping in, they can step in. But again, we never ask an operator or frontline employee to ever step in and do something beyond reporting.
Thanks, Kristen. That's really helpful. I'm going to read a couple other questions. Here's a question. Is multi-agency training at the same time, say transit bus operators and state DOT highway workers, is that a good idea to help foster more interaction between transportation sectors? Or should training be separate so it can be more specifically designed for certain modes? Kristen, do you have any thoughts about that?
That's a great question. Because really we keep talking about bus operators, but I've heard great reports as it relates to highway, DOT staff that are maintenance staff at maybe a rest area, or maintenance staff at a transit agency. I do think that if you have an opportunity to get a group together to train, and it's a cross-cultural training, I actually think that might be good, especially if you open up the floor to discuss what people have seen. I think I saw a situation at this rest area, or I think I saw this situation at a bus stop. Or in the bathroom at the transfer center. I do, or I saw this wherever the situation. It might invoke some conversation and spur people on. So yes, I do think it's a good idea. Annie, what do you think? Because I don't think that there's anything specifically out there for, say, a construction worker or a maintenance person in DOT, but it may be that the Truckers Against Trafficking materials might work in some areas where the buses on the lookout materials might not.
Yeah, I mean, the materials that we've developed in terms of the training resources are very much, kind of industry specific. So we have a 30-minute training video that is for, the trucking industry. We have a 30-minute video that is for the bus industry. We have I think it's a 38-minute video that is for law enforcement, specifically thinking about state patrol, highway patrol, some of the folks that are doing those interdictions. Though our coalition builds are designed actually to bring together, multiple sectors. I mean, still focus on transportation and the people that are out on the roads, but, bring them together to learn about what's happening locally. What does the issue look like locally? We always have a law enforcement panel that is able to share kind of case studies, and I think it makes it very just kind of very relevant and real for the local audience itself. So I think there's a lot of value to really to both.
That's great. Thank you, Annie and Kristen. Here's another question. The requirements for getting a CDL have gotten more and more onerous and burdensome in New York State, while bus drivers are not being paid more to keep up with the extra requirements, causing bus shortages everywhere. How do you suggest encouraging buy-in for another training requirement amid this atmosphere? Kristen, could you speak to that?
I will, and I understand that you're thinking in terms of motivating people. My first answer to that is, I think that we should all encourage each other to do what is right. I do know that there is more burdensome things that have to be done. I don't think in New York at this point that it is a requirement to do this training for your CDL. We do know that that's a requirement in Kansas. We know that it is a requirement coming up in California, but I'm not certain about New York. I think that you take it as a manager or as a leader in your organization, take a look at the materials that Annie has provided for you. Sit down and look at that 30-minute video with a couple of other leaders and discuss how you can present this in a very positive light, not in a punitive one. Encourage people to do the right thing, because it really is like our mantra, not on my bus, not on my train, and not in my community. And I think if you approach it that every single training that I've been in with operators across the country, every single person, by the time they're finished understanding what the problem is and understanding that they can be a major part of the solution and that it doesn't take any extra effort on their part than what they're already doing. And that's taking care of the traveling public. That is what their mission is. That's what public transit's mission is to take care of the traveling public in a safe, effective, efficient way. That's what this training does.
Thanks, Kristen. So we have just a couple more minutes. If anyone has another question, I do have a comment here from Jeff Hazen, who's in Salem, Oregon. And he wanted to say that this training is really easy to present and the video is very captivating. They train their entire staff and their board on busing on the lookout. And when he says, when you do your training, it's very helpful to give information that has been in the news recently. It had a big impact. So that's great. Thanks, Jeff, for sharing that. And hopefully others can use all the resources that Annie provided. So we'll do a last call for questions, but if you have other questions after the webinar or questions about the resources, reach out to us and we can connect you, or Annie and Kristen have provided their contact information and are happy to help. So I think that's it, the last call for questions. Nellie, do you want to go to the final slides? So we just want to thank everyone for joining us today, and thank you again to Annie and Kristen for presenting on this. This is really great information, and hopefully we can utilize the resources and keep getting the word out about this and everyone's eyes out for things that are happening on their buses. We do want to put in a plug for another webinar that we're offering tomorrow on a very different subject, cost allocation. We have a new tool coming out, so if anyone's interested in that, we do have that tomorrow at 2 o'clock. And more information can be found on our website at nationalrtap.org/webinars. And also, we hope everyone is aware of our conference coming up this fall. It's September 15th to 18th in Portland, Oregon, and we would love for you all to join us. Registration is open, so you can check out the general agenda on the conference website, and we'll have a more detailed agenda coming out this summer. And then I forgot, also we have a peer roundtable coming up for transit managers. That's May 29th at 2 o'clock Eastern. And in our upcoming e-news, we'll have some of the discussion questions that, some topics that we have picked out for that, but bring your own questions. And that's a great open forum for just talking to your peers and information sharing. We'll just be on there facilitating. So thank you again to everyone for joining us today. And we hope you join us for future webinars, and contact us if you need any resources or have any questions. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.